we started splitting. She traced it back to Plato, when Plato started making the distinction. Because if you see the pre-Platonic, the Homer, the Homer plays and everything, they were still connected with the African ways of viewing the universe, the Native American ways, the Asian and everything ways, the pre-Platonic era. Those like Homer, because it was more about poetry, about representing the beauty of the universe and connecting with the audience emotionally, where the spirit will speak to people. You can see yourself in the characters in the play. So there was no crazy reason and separation. And we're all part of the experience, part of the human experience, part of the cosmic experience, because we're all one, belonging to a one ODYSEE that was directing us. But then Plato had the vision to split from there and say, no, that kind of way of looking at life and the universe and the cosmos renders human beings powerless. Because if you cannot demarcate between the thinking self and the object surrounding the thinking self, then you are subjugating the thinking self to the object around the thinking self. It's not possible that the thinking self can be part, symbiotically, part of that which surrounds it. It has to take responsibility and be able to think outside of that which surrounds it. And therefore, everything else outside of the thinking self becomes an object. And the thinking self becomes the subject. Therefore, the subject will act the verb. And then the object will receive the action, will be subjugated, will be submissive to the subject. Because if the subject is the entity that can think, that means that entity is superior to that which cannot think. Therefore, the entity that can think can now control that which cannot think and gives it names or whatever direction and everything, and now get power over it, control over it. Hence, we control nature, the West now, Eurocentric, Euro-American. Hence, we need to control nature, we need to control animals, we need to control everything else that cannot think. And by extrapolation, other human beings that cannot think. Because from the Plato point of view, it's only a few of people who have the ability to think and to find universal truth, what he calls the pure idea, the pure knowledge. It's not everybody that gets there. It's only a few. That is why in his era, and when I was in high school, I love his books. I read his books, The Republic and everything. In his era, he had a group of people that he himself was the student of Socrates. Socrates never wrote a book. We all know about Socrates through Plato's writings, because Plato was a faithful disciple, student of Socrates, which just happened to be infatuated with Socrates, because the whole life of Socrates was to engage the so-called sophists in Greek in the time. Sophists were people who are like our academics today, who think that they know so much because they went to school, they have all the big knowledge with the big PhDs. So in the Greek era, in that time, sophists were people. Can you hear me, or am I freezing? Okay. The sophists were the people who had acquired high level of knowledge, where society will bow down to them because they had the knowledge about everything. Even the governments and everything, the politicians will come to them and bow to them because they were a little bit like the Bible talks about the Pharisees. What did Jesus do? Was to challenge them, because Jesus kept telling them, you're lying to the people. You present yourself as the scholar of the Word of God, but look at the way you live. You're misleading my people. That was Jesus' whole fight against the Pharisees. who was supposed to be the expert and the teacher and the knower of the Word of God and knowledge. Same thing started with Aristotle before Christ. And you can see a little bit about the whole thing, how there is actually a link between all of that way of thinking. So Socrates' a purpose in life was to show those people that they actually didn't know anything, because he would engage them in philosophical conversations, and those people were excited thinking that they will know they have all the answers. But every time they would answer one of Plato's Socrates' question, one answer always brought another question. One of the answers always brought another question, because Plato was using what you therapists use know as the association in psychoanalysis. Association, where you want to help your patient by the process of association to travel back to the origin of their problem, because every time they say something, it leads to another question, and that pushes them to say something that leads to another question, until they will travel back to where that thinking actually originated, where the problem is suffering from actually originates. That's the whole principle. So that is a technique that Socrates was using. And you can see that there's nothing new in the face of the earth. Everything is recycled, because what we think as a big psychological therapeutic technique today was already applied before Christ's era by Socrates, who was showing those Pharisees that you think you know, but actually you don't know anything. And his famous saying was, all I know is that I don't know anything. And in French it's actually, elegant to say it, because he always say, tout ce que je sais, c'est que je ne sais rien. All that I know is that I don't know anything. And he actually believed it. He wasn't pretending. But in reality, he actually knew a lot. And Plato, who was an idealistic and a big idealist, he fell in love with that kind of teaching. As a successful lawyer and everything, he gave up everything and started following Socrates and tried to listen to his teaching. Try to implement what this guy was saying. So everything we know about Socrates is through Plato's writing, describing the life of his teacher. So that's why he became that idealist person, and he wanted to create a world of ideas that are stripped of our senses, because he says our senses are only perceptions, and because they're only perceptions, they're not the truth. They're not the universal truth. There is something called perception, opinion, and there's something called knowledge, idea. So Plato wanted to go there. So he started creating that. And his masters, Socrates was saying that we see, hear, smell, taste through our body, our senses, but we don't know through them. We know through our mind, because we think and we reflect on the things that we perceive. So therefore, knowledge, idea, pure, universal truth can only come through our mind, through our thinking. Therefore, thinking is superior. That was the demarcation now from the universal asili that every other culture in the world was believing in, being holistic, where there has to be balance between negative and positive, feelings and cognition. But that was the line of demarcation from Plato onward, where no, we need to take control of the feelings and the sense and everything, and only use our thinking. So he couched that kind of ideology, theory, or whatever in an academic way, and also in a scientific way, mathematics and everything. That's why it was more welcome, and it permeated the Western asili, the Western culture. And now it started developing. That is how academia was birthed, because he started like having a small group of people who will follow him, and they have a meeting room, and outside of the meeting room on the door he has a writing that says no one can enter these premises except if he's a geometer. So he says, unless you are, of this body, a geometer or a geometry expert, because they only talk science, idea, math, and thinking, universal truth. So it was a selected elite that were part of that thinking. And that is how academia started developing. Because now more and more people wanted to be part of that. Because it was a revolutionary thinking process that was radically splitting from the pervasive thinking that was Homerian or Homeric, Homer and his plays.